Welcome to Taking the Higher Road. I'm Leah Shaver, President and CEO of the National Transportation Institute. Each week, we interview industry experts and thought leaders who bring their insights to the driver life cycle as we discuss the industry's greatest challenges, recruiting and retention of your valuable workforce. I'd like to thank and highlight the show's valuable sponsors. Their dedication and commitment to the industry and to this show is greatly appreciated. One thing I love about our industry and am continually reminded of is that it is full of unsung heroes who show up every day with passion, with dedication, and humility to get the job done today, while also having an innate ability to look ahead, steer our companies and our industry in new directions, forge new paths, and of course, uplift those around them while doing so. Today, I'm excited to have one of those leaders on the show. Lisa Gonnerman, Vice President of Enterprise Services at TA Dedicated, has been leading safety and operation teams for more than 3 decades in our industry. She's also been active in state and national associations, committees, advocacy groups, and so much more. Lisa was recently named one of the 3 finalists for this year's Influential Woman in Trucking Award by the Women in Trucking Association. If you can't tell, I am very excited to share her with you on this episode of Taking the Higher Road. Lisa, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Leah, and greetings to you and to our audience today. And thank you for hosting me on the show today. 32
Glad
years
to have
or
you.
3 decades sounds like a long time.
Well, speaking of a long time, not that we're putting it all in numbers, but you started in trucking in 1992, and you have had quite the career since then. You've worn a lot of different hats, and you still do in your current role. But briefly introduce yourself to the audience and tell us about what you do now and the parts of your role that you appreciate the most today.
All right. Well, yeah, 1992 was a long time ago, but I have really enjoyed my career. I have spent over 18 years in operations, and then I made a switch and went over into safety. So I have about 14 years in kind of that safety, compliance, and recruiting. In my role today, I'm very lucky to be able to work with a lot of different departments. So today I have safety and compliance. We're doing a startup of our logistics area. And I also have contract services. I really, really love working with all the different departments, just working hand in hand with operation and just really closely with the entire business. I love seeing the end to end, and it really helps to create that feeling and accountability that safety is really owned by everyone as well.
I love it when anyone has the ability to take blinders off for themselves and for the people on their team to be able to see, as you put it, the entire enterprise. It really allows for such a greater perspective, a greater energy when you come to work, and ultimately a greater appreciation of everything that it takes for everyone to help our truck drivers safely deliver every day. Well, so many people in our industry seem to have fallen into it accidentally or intending their time to be a short stint, maybe put me in that category, before they find what's next. Yet so many then get hooked on trucking, again, put me in this category, and build long careers here. You're one of the few people, especially on this show, where that doesn't seem to be the case. You went to college and studied trucking and logistics, so your journey into trucking seems to have been more intentional than most that we meet here. Tell us about that, because it seems like quite a unique choice for a 20-year-old college student, especially back then, to opt for.
It was a very new degree at that time. And I'll be honest, I went to college thinking I was going to major in accounting until I took that first accounting class. And I was lucky enough to go to Iowa State University, and in their business college, like most places, you take those core classes, your management, your marketing, your finance, all the fun stuff. And one of them was transportation logistics. I really had no idea what that was going to be, but I took that first class and I absolutely fell in love to it. I still remember calling my mom saying, I know what I'm going to major in. And I said, transportation logistics. And there was silence on the other end. She had no idea what that was, and I had to explain it to her. So I found it just very intriguing to learn about the 5 different modes of transportation. At that time, it was transportation logistics. It's more of that supply chain now. But it was a new major, and it was very small. A lot of my classes were single numbers or less than 20, 30 people, as it was so new, but it was just intriguing to me. Now, I did have uncles that were drivers, they were truck drivers, and I myself grew up on the farm. So I knew how to drive a tractor and all that fun stuff. And being outside, I love all that stuff. But I also recognized it as a long-term career. When you think about what trucking does and the importance of all five modes of transportation, there's so much importance there. And I knew it wasn't going to be something that was just a short-term piece. It was a long-term endeavor. And I started to do a lot of research about all the possibilities. And again, I fell in love with it. And I'll never forget my first job. I was out on the parking lot, and he was the operating center manager at the time. He's in his suit, he's crawling around the trailers and on the ground, showing us all the different pieces of a trailer and a tractor. And he made the statement that, once you get in trucking, you'll never get out. Of course, I thought he was a crazy old man at that time. And now I'm that crazy old woman that is saying it to everybody as well, because it is addictive. It's fast paced, and I absolutely love the industry.
It's very cool because you knew something that we now try to share with so many other people on a regular basis. We're probably going to get to this in today's conversation, but it's just specifically so interesting. I used to recruit students from the Iowa State supply chain program. Now they invite me to speak to their students at their transportation summits, and I support some of their staff with information and mentoring. And so I think it's really cool that that's where you came from and had that appreciation where not only did it come naturally to you, but now years later, they're trying to do such a great thing and on a regular basis with all of their incoming students. So very cool full circle moment. Well, I want to talk about your recent big news. You've been named one of 3 finalists for this year's Influential Woman in Trucking Award. The industry has evolved tremendously since you joined, particularly when it comes to the prevalence of women in our industry and the prevalence of women in leadership roles, especially women in safety-focused roles like much of your career has been. So over 30 years in, it has to be kind of a shake me moment to get nominated for an award like this. What does it mean to you with where you're at right now and where the industry has now shown up for you?
Leah, I am just honored and very humbled by this nomination and to be one of the 3 finalists. I remember being at Women in Trucking last year, and I listened to this panelist of the 3 women that were nominated last year, and Shelley Simpson won. And, I was just like, wow, that is just tremendous. It's awesome. And yeah, it's very cool. I'm honored. But I would say that over the years, yes, many things have changed, because even in my Iowa State classes that were so small, there were very few women. And again, growing up in the industry, it wasn't always easy. There have been many, many challenges with being, the only female in the room. Of course, the bathroom line's always short. That's a good thing. But it's been hard. And I have seen some very good progress, I would say, in women becoming more involved and going into those leadership positions. So, I always look at it as from an industry of, as I'm getting closer to that retirement, it means more to me of how can I leave something better than I found it? Whether that's within the industry, whether it's with a company, or it's with people. I always want to leave something and make something better. So we still have a number of challenges within our industry yet. I'm very concerned about distracted driving, for example, not just with our trucks, but the entire motoring public. My husband and I travel a lot. We have kids in Kansas City and Des Moines, and we love to go see them. And in fact, just last night we were coming back, and the cars that we saw just reading books and videos, and it's somebody hanging out in that left-hand lane, and guess what? You can guess they're on the phone, and sure enough, there are. There's regulations that we need to kind of tweak and continue to do so, whether it's hours of service or CSA. And we got to continue to fight for our drivers and our companies and really safety overall. Zero emissions and the driver shortage. They're not done yet. So that fight continues, and I love to be involved. And I think it really helps me be a more well-rounded person in leader as well.
I didn't send you this question ahead of time, but it's directly related to what you just said. As you know, I work with a lot of different types of companies every day, and more companies are evaluating and implementing or dealing with the consequences of having implemented a zero tolerance policy for cell phone use, meaning as long as the vehicle is in motion, that the cell phone is not being utilized. We work with some very large companies where this is a policy. It tends to be a deterrent for attracting drivers and certainly can be a reason that folks are frustrated because, as you know, we also want to balance an attractive job for folks that want to enter into the industry to stay in the job. And of course, part of that is being disconnected from family in many of our job descriptions. And therefore, that's their connection, albeit their connection to the company, to management, etc. So, again, off the cuff, I mean, your thoughts on those types of policies to people that are considering them or have implemented them and are having challenges. I have to believe that you've worked with some of those organizations.
I sure have. I have worked with organizations on both sides of that fence, and it's a tough one. It really is. And I think, especially after coming out of COVID, where I think there was even more of an emphasis on staying connected and with your family and being away and checking in on those. I think that whatever stance that you have to be able to manage it. Because if you can't manage it, then it can be something that can actually hurt you worse. So whatever that may be, you have to look at your processes, you have to look at your policies, and you have to make sure that they all connect and you're sending that same message. Because if you have a no cell phone policy, but your dispatchers are texting a driver and keep calling a driver, well, is that something that's really going to work? So I think you have to look at your whole picture and figure out what does work best for you and your company. And it's not easy, but we all know that technology is out there and it can be a distraction if it's not used correctly.
Yeah, it's a really good point, as all of us have all of that technology at our fingertips, and that's what we're utilizing to talk with any of our staff, let alone our drivers. Something that I did not consider. Okay, let's go back to the topic of women in trucking, and your nomination and just in general progress throughout in your career. So we've made tremendous strides over the past few decades in bringing more and more women into the industry across all of the roles, from drivers to techs to sales, operations, HR, leadership, etc. But of course, I have to believe you'd agree that there's still progress to be made and barriers to break down. So one aspect I talk about often is that at many companies, leadership tracks can require a reload to work at terminals in a more rural location, or a second or third shift stint to get the full experience, if you will. And that can be challenging, particularly for women trying to balance work life and family life, responsibilities, and also learning and growing and acclimating to company policy and culture. So as someone who's worked through the ranks into leadership positions, what are your thoughts on how our industry can balance those two competing ideals? What we want to be best-in-class employers, we want to accommodate the needs of working parents, and that there are inherent barriers that exist to working parents, particularly working women, in finding these leadership tracks that are attainable.
I absolutely love seeing more women coming into this industry. It's still very male dominated, but we are making some really good progress. And I have to say, in growing up with or raising two kids and watching them grow up, it hasn't been always easy. And I have to say that, my husband and I were really good partners. When my kids were little, I traveled a lot when they were young, but my husband was my saving grace for me. He encouraged me to do it. He was very supportive of my career, and I honestly could not have done it without him. Many times we had to sit down and discuss, okay, what does this look like? What does this mean? I have been asked to move in many times during my career, and that's when we would take it home and just sit down and talk. Is this the right time? What would that mean? And for us, we did choose not to move and to keep our kids in the school system that they were until they graduated. But once they graduated, we were gone. And so it is a matter of, what you and your family, your spouse want to do and what can be done. We had a really good support network out there, and it made it a little bit easier. But he's very career orientated as well. So between the two of us, it was a lot of partnership to really make it work out. And I tell my team all the time, whether they're male, female, whatever the case may be, that you always have to support your family, and family has to come first. And I have always said that. And now that my kids are 29 and 35 and I have a grandson, my daughter sees that as having her child. That, Mom, I saw that you put our family first. I missed very few football games, very few cheerleading clinics and anything like that, from soccer games. But it was really sitting down and talking to my manager as well, because I wanted to be able to do stuff, but was there any flexibility that I could work it really on a little bit more of my schedule so that I could be there for my family? And I think right now, Teams and the virtual meetings have made it a little bit more, or a little easier, I would say. And there's some helpful options out there for some hybrid schedules and working from home in the office that can really help somebody earlier on in their career. I have to admit, mine, I kept taking opportunities where I normally didn't have to move when the kids were little because we just couldn't at the time. But that's where I got into different areas. I didn't stay in just one area. I looked at it as, what can I learn right now? What feather can I put in my hat? And so that the time comes when I have a little bit more flexibility, that I can really take advantage of it. And I think doing a lot of that, as far as choosing when to do it and growing my skills to be prepared for it, helped shape my career and my goals. It wasn't easy.
I think that's the maybe we should have led with that. It's not easy,
It's
whether
not
it's
easy.
the business making the decisions of how to evolve the experience of its workforce, or the family and how to juggle. And let's say there isn't a family unit. It could be a situation where there's a lot less support and how you make decisions. But I've always said, say yes to every opportunity. And I think what I hear you saying is also to always prioritize what's happening at home first. And then second, if you can't take that opportunity, what more can you learn? What experience can you add? What can you do in the seat that you're in right now? So that was excellent advice.
Exactly.
Hopefully I reiterated it the way you intended.
Yeah, you did well, Bill.
All right, excellent. So you've led safety departments and programs at multiple fleets in your career. And while safety and recruiting operate as distinct departments, obviously they've become intertwined in key ways over the last decade and more. Right now in the current market, we have a driver supply and demand situation where fleets can say, okay, we're going to up our experience requirements. We're going to get stricter on cell phone policies. Look at that. I did have it in here. Or implement our usage of technology to monitor and track safety compliance. Often those changes can have an impact on recruiting and retention. In your career managing both safety, driver engagement programs, how do you see that fleets balance best those two needs? The mission to promote safety is our top priority, while also trying to provide a satisfactory work experience for drivers who may feel overwhelmed or deterred by safety technology or requirements.
It's a challenge. Again, another area of a challenge. But yes, I have found that what we need to always be doing is looking for that right driver for the right position. And you're right, safety, ops, recruiting, work really hand in hand. And I truly think the opportunity for success is in that partnership, knowing what's going on in the operations world, knowing what's going on in the recruiting world. I tend to try to go towards kind of normalizing, not doing too much for those changes with your hiring criteria, because with our world today, whether you tighten them up or you loosen them up, you always have to understand the impact of a nuclear verdict today. That risk exposure and the liability is something that you and those departments really have to understand of what do we need to do and how do we protect the company. So what we've done here is we've done more of looking at it in the complexity of work. So at TA Dedicated, we have a lot of different dedicated. So some are more like one way and some are very complex. So we have chosen to go, for example, down the route of hiring towards complexity and what is the experience, what is that skill level that is needed. So not something really across the board where one shoe fits everyone, but really looking at it into more of a detailed what is needed for each account. So I think that gives you a little bit more flexibility as well. But again, it's all of those departments working together in that partnership that can really create that success, I think.
Well, speaking of success, you've been fortunate to work at several prominent trucking companies in your career. Tell us about some of the things that you've seen as most successful and maybe some things that you've seen carriers try that haven't been as successful, specifically in terms of recruiting and retention and safety programs. And obviously, we're not naming names here. We're just talking about concepts.
I understand. So yes, I have been awarded the opportunity to work with very small companies to some very large companies. So it's been a really unique experience to see the differences and small, medium, large, whatever the case may be. I think some of the key items from a success standpoint is that leadership team and that partnership. That leadership team just needs to constantly communicate, work together, build that partnership. You got to take down the silos. So silos just don't work. If somebody's working just in a safety silo, I mean, I'll be honest, I can create 10 programs a day and roll them out, but I have to be realistic about what operations can do as well. From a time management, also from the drivers that we have, what are those capabilities? So we have to know each other's worlds. So take down those silos. I think it's also important to make sure that everybody understands very clearly that safety is everyone's accountability. It doesn't work when it's only the safety department's accountability. As being a leader in that position as safety, I can push, but I'm only going to get so far. But if it's a top down where safety is really the accountability of everyone, I can guarantee you're going to have more success. So I think those are the best results. And the other thing I would say is some of the best results I've achieved, and we won a President's Trophy Award for it, is what I refer to as operational led safety. So safety, again, is that support department, but we don't talk to the drivers every single day, day in and day out. Where operations and that front line are really the ones that have that relationship with the driver and that communication. So how can you arm them to really keep that awareness on the forefront on a day-to-day basis? So operational led safety really does work. And the other thing that I would add, Leah, is that relationships matter. Relationships matter a lot, whether it is within the internal teams working together, or even just as important, I should say, is relationships with those drivers. Whether you're talking safety, retention, relationships are absolutely huge in our industry. So make sure that you're building those relationships, because we do have to address some issues that aren't always, the most positive thing, whether it's an accident or an injury or an hours of service, where we have to do some coaching and mentoring and training. But if you have a strong relationship, you're going to get through that better and in a more positive manner. So relationships are huge.
Agreed, 100%. Well, let's talk about the freight market. That was not a mic drop. That's truly my next question. For those of us who've been in trucking for any period of time, we've seen that freight market cycles play out, the ups and downs of our industry. You and I have seen these cycles time and time again. So as we navigate this current tough cycle, will it ever end? How do you draw upon your experience, and what's your advice to those in the industry that maybe haven't been through all of these cycles, particularly those that are in a recruiting and retention role?
You're right. Over 32 years, I have seen a number of different economic and freight cycles. Some have been shorter, some extreme, some less extreme. And our current one is actually very, very challenging right now. and it is probably one of the most challenging that I feel that I have experienced. A lot of times in the past, we've had some low freight rates, spot market rates were low, but on the one that we're currently going through, our costs are just very high and they have not came down. So that kind of makes this even more challenging. I tend to tell people to hang in there. We will come out. We don't know exactly when. We hope that we hit bottom here and that we're coming up on that swing up. But, some of the advice that I would give is, continue to work hard. Don't give up. Contract rates will keep you really even throughout the good and the bad. Service is very important, but you always have to be prepared to get through that next cycle. So in a down cycle, I look at, you're preparing to prosper. So how can you prepare for when that market does do that uptick? So now is the time to review your processes, review your communication, review, all of those things that you can control right now. Focus on those so that when that uptick does come and we move into that next cycle, that you're ready to go and you can hit the ground running. So now's the time to really take care of some of those things. And I would say communication is really key too. I work with a lot of folks that are like, they went from the COVID with all the freight and the abundance to, our market now where it comes to complete solicitation and, maybe grabbing some off the spot market. And so there might be some additional training that you need to deploy to the different types of roles out there to help them be successful, because they may not have encountered this in the past, and it's going to be a new experience for them. So help them be set up, get them the training, the encouragement, the communication. So stay close to your people right now.
Yeah, it's so true. We often, let's say blinders aside, we get really stuck in right now and not so much tomorrow. Well, speaking of tomorrow, we all know that trucking trends older in terms of our driver demographics. The average entrant in our industry is nearly 40 years old and may enter much older than that. The representation of millennials and Gen Z is by far, far behind the general workforce population. In your opinion, from your perspective, how do we bridge that gap? How do we reach younger people and interest them in trucking careers? How do we help them be the Lisa of 32 years ago that saw that trucking was in all of the things? How can we keep them here and when they do join us? And what are your thoughts on this pressing issue for our workforce?
This is a challenge too. Another challenge, as we talked about others today, this is another one. And, one of the big things is, to be a CDL holder and drive interstate, you have to be 21. And a lot of people already have their career decided by then. So I think a lot of what we need to do as an industry is really that education. We do a lot of trucks going to schools, helping them see what are the capabilities, how many jobs there really are in the transportation industry. And I think at one time we thought everybody had to go to college, but we're realizing that we're losing out on some of the trade industries out there. So how can we focus on it? College is great, don't get me wrong, but those trade schools and the trade industries out there where it is very important, we've got to start channeling some of the folks into those areas. So how can we get programs that will encourage that and really help promote our industry? And I also think there's some image issues out there that we've got to tackle as well, which has been a continuous problem. And, I think we have a great industry. It's like a lot of other areas. One bad apple makes it everybody look bad, but that's really not the case. There are some great companies, wonderful drivers, wonderful people that I have found in this industry. So we've got to promote that. And I think with the additional technology coming in, there's a lot more today than, believe me, back in 1992 when I started. And so I think that can attract some people. And how can we exploit that and help them see what the opportunities are? And I know I've been on, the call on Washington, both on the state and the local levels, for legislators and helping them understand some of our challenges in this area, as well as how can they help create some of those opportunities out there. So we got to keep working it. We're not there yet. We got a lot of work to do in this area.
Always so much more work to do. I'm going to end with this. You have been an active citizen of trucking. This is my new favorite phrase, and it was originally pegged to label you. So, an active citizen of trucking, having been involved in state associations, in national associations, in advisory boards, in safety councils, you name it, the list is long. You have been involved and committed to safety and the advancement of issues important to all of us. How has your participation in these areas shaped your career? Why is it important to be involved in the ways that you have been? And what advice would you give to others in finding opportunities to be active in the industry in these ways?
I love all the involvement that I have done, and I am not sorry about a single thing that I have had the opportunity to be involved in. And I think it really has helped shape me. It has given me that additional exposure to the different areas. It's easy to see one side of things, but being involved in the different organizations gives you that fuller picture and more rounded approach to dealing with things and understanding the why. And I think one of the huge things that it's really opened up for me is my network. I will never claim to be the most knowledgeable person about anything, but man, when I have a network, and I'm not afraid to call on my network and ask for help and ask those questions, and getting involved in the different areas, and it is really opened up that network for me. I remember attending one of my first meetings. I didn't know anyone, and obviously it was very male dominated, but I had somebody take a hold of me and just help me understand all the opportunities, how to get involved. And I loved it. And I have thanked that person profusely over and over again. So what I would say is, find a good mentor that can help you, make some introductions, get you involved. Believe me, I don't have that FMCSA, how many page book memorized, but I know how to look it up. I can call on people and I use my resources. So find a mentor that can help you, support you, and help you grow in those areas of your interest. And it's kind of like going to college, Leah. When you find something that is very interesting to you, it's not a burden or a chore to become more involved. You enjoy it. And I love helping others and helping be successful. And I think that's one of the key pieces that I love about being in safety. We share safety because we want to protect everyone out there. So going to meetings, hey, how do you do this? What do you do in this area? And, people share. And that's how we all become better together. So absolutely loved it. And I think it has really helped me guide my career.
Excellent. Well, Lisa, I want to thank you again for joining us, for sharing your story with us, and for being an inspiration to so many in our industry. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And thank you for joining us on another episode of Taking the Higher Road. Stay tuned for next week's show when Jeremy Raymer returns to the show for another fantastic conversation. Please know that your feedback is very important to us, and your kind reviews keep us on the hunt for more great talent to put in front of you. Please remember to rate and review Taking the Higher Road on whatever platform you're using to listen. Once again, a special thanks to the sponsors of today's show. Until next time, thank you for taking the higher road.